Good morning, everybody, and thank you all very much for attending today's Scotland's first virtual building tour. I'm joined here today by the FORE Partnership and by Cooper Cromar. Next slide, I think, Camelia. And we're going to talk about Cadworks Glasgow. So I'm joined here today by Basil Demerutis, who is the managing partner of FORE Partnership, along with Aurelian Collignon, who's the associate director, and Giles Edward, who's also an associate director for FORE. They are the developers of the building, and we're also joined by Ross Blair from Cooper Cromar, who are the architects of the building. They're going to take us on this virtual tour of the offices, so please sit back and enjoy the show. Next slide, please.
Great. So I think this is now over to me. Thank you. Thanks very much, Gillian, for that very kind introduction, and welcome everyone to this virtual tour. Sorry we couldn't do it live and in person. So my name is Basil Demerutis. I'm managing partner of FORE Partnership. I'm going to give you a quick overview of who we are and of the Cadworks project, and bring in some of the other members of the team to try to bring this project, a very exciting project of ours, to life for you that we're undertaking in Glasgow. First, perhaps a word or two about us. FORE Partnership, we're a real estate investment boutique active in Western Europe with a focus on the UK and on offices. We look after about 1.1 million square feet of real estate, around 750 million in value. But at our core, we're a firm that believes in transforming real estate in a sense that we can do well and do good at the same time. We've recently become a B Corp last year, and we've also signed been a signatory to net zero carbon commitment by 2025. Next slide, please. So we believe fundamentally in creating communities, and communities are really at the heart of what we do, and deeply integrating the ESG into everything that we're up to. So we focus on these four verticals in our strategy. We try to reduce the carbon footprint of our buildings, both in embedded carbon and operational. We focus on health and well-being, and trying to drive health outcomes as much as anything else. We focus as well on the design of our buildings and try to make them vibrant, and embodying everything about the new types of office space that we're creating now in a post-COVID world. Indeed, we've been thinking about what the nature of the office means for the last decade or so. So this isn't something that we're just coming to lately. And then lastly, we focus on the S in ESG as much as we do in the E, and we try to focus on creating powerful solutions to long-term, complicated, systemic problems that we see in the communities in which we operate. Next one, please. So we're going to take you through a quick why, what, where, when, and maybe a bit of how as well on Cadworks, and over the next 55 minutes or so, give you a sense for what it is that we're accomplishing there. Next one, please. So our vision for Cadworks was to create one of the most sustainable office buildings in Scotland, and we don't take that challenge on lightly, and we certainly are aware of the responsibility that those words embody as well. And when we think about sustainability, we think about the complex system in which our buildings sit, and so from urban transportation to supply chain and procurement to how tenants operate it, and indeed the wider community of stakeholders that surround the building as well. So that's really been our vision for this important site in the center of Glasgow. Next slide, please. Ross, want to chime in on the location?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everybody, and thanks Basil. Yeah, so I'm Ross Blair from Cooper Cromar Architects, and we're a Glasgow-based architecture practice. And our office is about a 5-minute walk from the Cadworks site, so we're very familiar with the immediate and wider context to this project. So Cadworks lies on the north of Cadogan Street, which is an area which is currently undergoing significant change and regeneration. As a practice, Cooper Cromar, we're involved in close to 1 million square foot of new office buildings, including a few projects in the immediate vicinity. There's the JP Morgan on Argyll Street, BAM at Atlantic Square, and the grid for M&G directly across the road from the Cadworks site. So Cooper Cromar originally achieved the planning consent for this back in 2014, replacing 2 existing buildings on the site, which we'll see shortly. FORE then subsequently purchased the site and asked us to reimagine the existing consent with a new focus on sustainability, which has given us some exciting opportunities to rethink about how we go about city centre office design. Next slide.
I knew that was going to happen, wasn't it? So I'll pick up the next couple of slides and just talk quickly about the why, a bit about the why. So we saw in this site that Ross just described the possibility to create a new breed of office space. And again, we acquired this a good few years before COVID, so it was already well on our mind that Glasgow was ready to accept the new kind of workspace that we had in mind and that we've done elsewhere. And I think at its core, what we find in our discussions with tenants is that increasingly they're struggling with their CSR and ESG obligations and values and how to express them, and increasingly realizing that actually this physical space that they occupy has a high degree of correlation between their own carbon footprint, but also importantly their own purpose and what it means for them and what they stand for and the values that they hold dear. Next slide, please. Of course, key also in our decision to invest in this asset was a critical evaluation of Glasgow. And what we find when we look at Glasgow is an incredibly dynamic city, one that we feel has a very accommodative business environment to do business, and that's partly led by local government, but it's also driven by highly skilled workforce, incredible universities and higher education academies and organizations, and really a very dynamic and thriving city in which people want to live and work. Next slide, please. So maybe I'll pass it back to Ross to talk more specifically about what we inherited and what our plans that we came up with for the building.
Yeah, so Cadworks is positioned, it's on the corner of Cadogan Street and West Campbell Street, which is right in the heart of the Glasgow Central Business District. These images show the original 2 office buildings that were positioned on the site, which became obsolete and were past the point of recycling and reusing. I think it would be fair to say that Cadogan Street itself is characterised by a mishmash of building styles from the 1970s and 1980s. So the design intent was always to create a new mannered, timeless building that would try and set a new design benchmark for Cadogan Street moving forward. Next slide. So the new proposal has a simple, elegant grid with a distinct bottom, middle and top, the regular grid only being abstracted at the point of entry. So the 2 primary street elevations, we've tried to maximise natural daylighting with a full height curtain wall and glaze system, with the solid elements formed in a high quality GRC cladding. There are dual entry points for both pedestrians and cyclists on West Campbell Street, which we'll come on to talk about shortly. Next slide.
Maybe I will chime in here for this part of the presentation. Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Aurélien Collignon. I'm an associate director at FORE, and I would like to present you with a few of the areas of focus that we had while designing and developing Cadworks, and some elements of innovation as well that we have for the building. So the first area was definitely connectivity and the infrastructure that we built around the product, the building itself, recognizing that there is currently almost nothing more important than having reliable infrastructure around connectivity. So I think this really features very proudly as a key focus for us to be able to provide occupiers with the right infrastructure which is secured and reliable for the business to obviously be safe, but also develop further. So it is, we do know that this is obviously a key point for occupiers, which keeps on coming back with discussions with them. And in order to be at the forefront of this, recognizing that connectivity is really central for businesses to promote their workspace to their staff, and also put a case forward for staff to be able to really come back to the office and work efficiently. This Cadworks is featuring some elements which allow for resilience as well. So, for instance, we have double points of entry into the building, and also dark fiber running through the core of the building, which allows for really kind of an easy, smooth plug and play. So when occupiers come in, all the way leaves already agreed, and then action and business can start immediately. So this is really kind of the core of the connectivity that we have here. Next slide, please. So I think this is also touching on some similar points around connectivity, but just to mention that Cadworks is wired core Platinum, which is the top rating, and Cadworks was the first building to be actually registered in Scotland with the wired score, and went on to achieving the top rating. So we're really, really pleased with that. And again, that speaks to the credentials of the infrastructure, which is there, building free, Wi-Fi as well, so across the reception area all the way up to the building, and occupiers again can plug and play directly as soon as they move in. They don't need to start negotiating with internet service providers. Next slide, please. So really keen to talk about Airline Paint, which again is one of the various different partnerships that we've created here for Cadworks. I would say that more than just a paint or innovative paint, I think we see this product as really being tech enabled. Airlight is really a technology that is built in 100% mineral paint, and that will really enable the space to be, and the air in the space to be cleared from any harmful elements, so NOx, but also greenhouse gases and bacteria and viruses. So really, really topical. We're actually rolling out the partnership with Airlight across the whole portfolio that can be used indoor, outdoor, and the technology embedded in the paint is being activated by the daylight. So any areas really where daylight comes in, the paint will be active. It is important to recognize, I think, when we were going through this element of the building and establishing this relationship with Airlight, that we spend a lot of time indoor, and this is where usually the quality of the air is the poorest. So I think it could be up to 5 times more toxic indoor than outdoor, and I think developers will recognize that more and more as occupiers are actually starting to really question what is the quality of the air. How do I ensure that I am not actually becoming more sick in a building than outside? So it's been great actually, and we'll definitely keep rolling this out further as well. Next slide, please. This is one of the key areas as well for us is everything that we do needs to be we need to be able to track it, to measure it. We need to be able to gather the data. We need to be able to understand how the building reacts, whether it reacts accordingly to all these elements that that went into the design, and also the operational side of things. So how do we track that? We have an army of sensors in Cadworks, which allows us to understand, and also we extend that to possibly occupiers coming in. So that could be rolled out from the landlord area to the demised area. What is the occupancy like? What is the CO2 level? What is the humidity and dust level? To really have a full picture. Metrica is one of the partnerships that we have, which provides you with a very, very clear dashboard, actually the one that you can see on the slide here, that gives you the scale on which of these kind of 5, 6, 7 main measurements that we're going to track. How do we do? And then we can really feed that back, have a look again, and trying to understand area per area into the building, where the space and the air quality is better, or where it's actually not behaving as it should be. So visualization of the data is critical for us. Feedback, and then so that we can really inform behaviors and share that with our occupiers as well. Next slide, please. This slide really it is around sustainability, and I think it touches on both sustainability and innovation. So we'd like to really emphasize the fact that we've worked through the procurement and together with our main contractor as well to look at the construction element part of the build, but where are the main materials being used, where is the carbon being emitted, where can we have actually most impact in terms of sustainability all the way through. Steel is definitely one of the key area of focus, where we have actually procured up to 80% recycled content steel. So we've really had to look through main contractor up to the supply chain to understand how the steel was really put together, produced, and how we could maximize and optimize that recycled content element. So achieving up to 80% was really a great success for us. There are other elements. So we've got also 30% recycled content in the rebar, but also we focused on the glass, the concrete, all the way through. And these are really, again, areas of innovation for us, rather than just seeing that as part of the traditional construction. There is a lot happening in this area. Next slide, please. Which you will see on this slide here, somewhat a little bit of what I've just mentioned again. So sustainable construction is what I've just touched on, but you can see other things as well. So for instance, we are really pushing the metering, the monitoring of the data, as I mentioned with Metrica. How could we have the right feedback as to knowing exactly whether Cadworks behaves as it should be if we don't measure everything. So there is over 180 smart meters all the way through the building to really slice and dice the various different spaces and allow us to really meter and track small power, ventilation, energy, so water, gas, electricity, and then we can then see whether there is a spike or whether the building doesn't behave as it should be, and then feed that back into the operational side of things. We also have, just to point out, but I can let you have a look at what's on the slide, and then we can pick up on questions afterwards. The cold water loop is also something that we focused on to ensure that the cold water system remains safe at any point in time. So as soon as it hits 25 degrees Celsius, it would automatically just flush itself to avoid any contamination in the system. Next slide, please. So this slide to mention that I think everything that we've done so far has really been with the occupiers at kind of at the heart of the product, and I think any developers would mention these words, but we really designed Cadworks, and even the brand speaks for itself as the Cadworking. So what is Cadworking? Who is the Cadworker? What needs do they have? What is their life looking like? What do they need to be able to really thrive into their daily business lives? So this is really the brand that supports all the innovations that we built into the design and construction phase. Next slide, please. And again, I mean, I'm not going to add too much because I think it touches again on water and air and quality and daylight, which are key themes that we've followed all the way through and really push boundaries everywhere possible. So the building is going to be rail-ready silver, and it would be BREEAM excellent rated as well. Next slide, please. I think I will hand over back to you, Ross.
Yeah, so you're now standing at the point of arrival at the building, and hopefully you'll start to see some of the features that Aurelian's been talking through about how we've managed to integrate this into the building design itself. So the reception space itself is split into sort of 3 distinct zones. So we have this central zone which will lead you through as the main primary circulation through to the lift lobby, the stairs, and the ground floor suite. Rather than your usual reception desk and traditional arrival, FORE led us to create a much more flexible and welcome experience, with a front of house concierge coming to greet you when you enter the building. Even since these visuals were created, we've been challenged further by FORE to introduce biophilia into the reception dine. And now when you enter the building, you'll be greeted by a living wall in that back wall that you see. Next slide. To the left of that circulation zone, we have a small co-working area, which can be opened up and shut off by a series of pivoting screens. In the background of this image, you can see the third zone through a series of glazed screens, giving us a visual connection from the reception area down to the cycle ramp. In order to put cycling at the forefront of the design, we wanted to try and give equal prominence to the pedestrian entrance rather than tucking your cycle entrance down the back lane as would be this sort of traditional design approach. Next slide. And again, this is just to really show you on the floor plan how these three zones relate to each other on the right hand side of the plan. The digital screens that Aurelian was talking about will also be present in that reception area, feeding back the data to the tenants coming into the building. Car parking was shelved really on this project in favour of cycle parking, but we still managed to maintain 4 electric car charging spaces at the top right hand corner of the plan, you can see. Next slide. Moving down the cycle ramp into the basement, you're welcomed by a best-in-class cycle storage facility, which gives you a wide variety of cycle provision for all different types of commuters. Next slide. And as you can see, the basement floor plan here, the bulk of the basement has been handed over to cycles and a large changing facility. So again, it's really just to hammer home the ethos that it's really all about ditching the car and cycling to work, and yeah, moving away from the traditional basement car park. I'll hand you back over to FORE.
Hi, my name's Giles Edwards. I'm an Associate Director here at FORE, and I'll be leading you through the next stage of the presentation. I think a lot of these facts and figures talk for themselves. I mean, there's some key points in here, just reinforcing what Ross was touching on around the 119 bike stations, 138 lockers in the best-in-class changing rooms, and really just sort of focusing on those key deliverables. Again, one of the points that Ross brought up was around the 4 electric car charging points. One of the main drivers behind this was actually we calculated that this would eliminate approximately 4,500 tons of carbon that otherwise would have been generated by people relying on cars driving to the building. So again, I think that hopefully demonstrates the ESG credentials that we're trying to put into practice throughout the development of the building and bringing the building into life. Next slide, please. So here we've just got some CGIs of one of the floor plates within the building. We're actually providing the accommodation in shell and floor conditions. So what you'll see here are potential fit outs from tenants. You've got top left a raft ceiling, then you've got bottom left a more more exposed ceiling configuration, and then on the right your classic 600 by 600 ceiling grid configuration. But again, the point here, although this demonstrates flexibility for incoming tenants, is that by providing the space in a shell and floor condition, not only does the tenant have that flexibility, they also aren't automatically ripping out existing infrastructure, which would undermine a lot of the kind of environmental and sustainability credentials that we were preaching to, if automatically there's a lot of building materials taken out and diverted to landfill, which we've worked so hard through the construction phase to make sure we're delivering in the sort of 90 percentiles diversion away from landfill. Next slide, please. So here we've got a CGI, a sort of demonstration fit out of how we envisage our occupiers using the building. And again, really trying to, what we hope to see is that people will be using the office space as a new type of working space, more collaborative, and a place where people will be coming to the office to work with their colleagues and rebuild that sense of community within the workplace that perhaps has been lost over the last 18 months or so. For us, that's a key thing throughout Cadworks, that community piece is not only important within the building, but the impact outside of the building. And I know that, that Basil's going to touch on that in more detail later. Next slide, please. So here's further demonstration of a potential fit out of the floors. What you'll see here is a interconnecting stair, and we've deliberately designed the floor plates so that that they are filled with soft spots along the grid lines of the steels to enable people to punch through floor to floor, which is actually something that we're seeing more and more in prospective tenants' designs. But those soft spots will enable that flexibility, and it was something that we were very keen to deliver. Next slide, please. And here just a little further detail on how we envisage people using the space. So working from left to right, you've got one floor plate, which is very much around client-facing facilities, and you'll see towards the bottom of that fit out the interconnecting stair, which would then lead up to the middle section, which shows more of the sort of the working space, the sort of almost the back of house space where most occupiers are going to be undertaking their day-to-day activities, but with that ease of connection down to the client-facing space, the collaborative working space. And then to the right, it's just a single floor plate, which we think sort of blends those two potential ways of working. And again, just really trying to focus on that flexibility of space and how people can make the space work as well as possible for them. Next slide, please. And I'll wrap up my section. This is just a short video which shows the recent topping out ceremony that we had at the building.
Great, thanks for that, Giles, and I hope you all had your speaker volume turned up full blast for that bit of bagpipe. So I'm going to talk spend just a couple of final minutes here talking about community, but I want to also just kind of tie a little bow around some of the things that you've heard so far about Cadworks. So for us, Cadworks is an innovative office building, an innovative office development, and I think it's easy to get wrapped up in saying that it's a sustainable or ultra sustainable or one of the most sustainable office buildings that's been created in Scotland. But really, what does that mean? And for us, it's a focus on technology and using technology in a way that deeply penetrates the full aspects of the building. We showed you a few examples around Airline Paint and around the sensor technology we've embedded, around the procurement strategy, even for things that are seemingly not very technologically oriented, like steel, glass, and concrete. So technology embedded, and this very forward-thinking future of real estate, future of office-focused development. It's also around transportation. You saw some of the things that we're doing innovatively around cycling. I think around transportation, we want to make it fun and easy and reduce the barriers for people to use different modes of transportation that may suit their fancy on any particular day. Maybe they want to ride their own bike one day, maybe they want to come in on a scooter or some other way. So we want to make that fun and easy, and of course low carbon. And we shouldn't forget about our obligations that we've set on ourselves to be net zero carbon as a firm in our portfolio by 2025, which means this building is coming out of the ground as a net zero carbon development, net zero carbon in operation, and it has no gas in the building, so it's an all electric building, for example. And I say those things really with this slide, community partnerships, because I think central to our approach is to deeply interconnect the environmental sustainability, the design, along with community. So if we have the next slide, please. And we really do feel like we invest in communities, and where we're laying the foundations that are more than just the concrete of the buildings. And so we take that really to heart. And for us, the community engagement piece isn't a bolt-on. It's not an obligation that we do on Friday afternoons after the rest of our work is finished. It's front and central to any and every meeting that we have with any contractor, subcontractor, or partner on the building. Next slide, please. And just by way of example, and after this we can wrap up and take some questions. How does that work in practice? That sounds like grand notions of big ideas, but how does that work in practice? So we've done some things, and here are three partnerships that we've put in place. One with Social Bites, another one with Refugee, where we've donated kits and help them welcome refugees to Glasgow. But I want to focus really on the last one, as I think it's a great example, and that's with Soul Riders, where again the part of the ethos of the building is around cycling. This fantastic cycle in, cycle out ramp. We took out the car parking in the building to put the cycle infrastructure in. So to help really tie together the environmental sustainability and social piece around cycling, we partnered with Soul Riders, where we did a campaign to help them further their mission to provide bicycles to people who need them for their daily commute, for health and well-being, or who can't afford them for themselves or for their families. And indeed, in their own business and operations, they bring in people who are maybe disenfranchised or on the fringes of society, near homeless or jobless, into their workshop and train them on how to repair and maintain and fix bicycles. So we partnered with them, and we did a campaign where we got donations of 50 or 60 bicycles for them, and we're looking at furthering that and having them have a physical presence in the building on a longer term basis. And then tying that obviously together with our tenants and occupiers in the building as we get rolling and get the first tenants in their post PC, where we'll do some campaigns together with the tenants, with Soul Riders, even together with Social Bites and Refugee, to create this community effect and help leverage our building for the greater social good in Glasgow. So I think that's us done. Kind of a cantering through it. Sorry we couldn't take you all on a tour of the building, but sadly the current circumstance doesn't really allow for it. But we're certainly happy to drill down into anything that we've talked about, and I'll pass it back to Gillian to moderate any Q&A.
Right, thanks very much. I think that was a great introduction to your project, and I think as somebody who works primarily for occupiers, I think the amount of thought, planning, and consideration that's gone into what occupiers want is brilliant to hear from a BCO perspective. We have one question in the tab which is about soft spots, I think, but I wanted to ask you one, and it was maybe one for Ross. So the fact that the building orientation is south facing, how did you deal with that within your kind of, your sustainability design?
Yeah, I mean, it's there's sort of solar control glazing in the project, and we've kind of taken that to as top a specification as we can. We're also challenged by Basel to try and look at all the sort of glass recycled content. So there's a lot of investigation went into the background of how we can try and push the envelope of the envelope, so to speak. So I mean, obviously we're trying to maximize daylight for the office flow plates themselves. So it's the whole project has been a sort of a balancing act between the practicalities of a a net office floor plate versus the, constantly being challenged by the guys at FORE to try and push it further and further.
Yeah. Yeah, no, okay. No, I wondered because you're kind of starting the back foot when you've got a south facing site. And I think, the whole kind of, the way you've considered the occupier is fantastic, and I just wondered what's the feedback you've had from people that are out in the market looking for space.
It's good. I think obviously we've been hampered a little bit by COVID, and that hasn't helped anyone in the industry. But I think certainly over the last, we're soon to announce our first lettings in the building, which is a great, which will be a great achievement. It'll be at sort of top rents, near enough the highest rents ever achieved in Glasgow. But I think what's interesting is the conversations more than anything with tenants. And I think over the last 18, 24 months, occupiers have really grabbed on to this ESG concept. And we've been doing green leases for 9 years, 8 years. And we've been spouting on about low carbon strategies for forever. But particularly with tenants, the green leases, we've actually had tenants push back on us and say, well, actually, what else could we do on these green leases? And you've put in the using the green lease toolkits and other things, all of the things that make the lease green, but what else? And so we put in, for example, obligations around keeping and maintaining it being a net zero carbon building, very important to us, and we've put our sort of name and blood on that one. So that's been great, and again, the first occupiers you're going to see in the building, it's really the ESG story has really drawn them to the building. And again, it's around the fact that they can walk into the building, they can reduce their carbon footprint as a company by half the day that they walk in the building. You go into a net zero building, most buildings are about 50% of the occupier's carbon footprint. So they reduce that 50% to zero. And they kind of also solve the second existential problem that they have, which is around people asking them about what's their purpose. I mean, people don't have to ask the occupier what's their purpose when they're in our building. They know what their purpose is. Yeah,
and it's almost demonstrated by the building itself.
Exactly.
By the decision to take it. And I think also as an interior designer, having lived with the having to rip out Cat A before you start a Cat B fit out has always just completely, frankly, done my head in from a sustainability perspective and a cost perspective and a time perspective. So the fact that you have these different choice options for clients or for tenants, I think just does away, it just unpicks all of that old tradition, actually, which I think was just an easy, and it was an easy route for property development for a long time. So I'm glad that you're really challenging that in the Glasgow market. I know there's some other examples of that at the moment, but it's good. Long may it continue. I think we've got a couple of questions here. I've got one. There was one clarity point from Jeff Taylor, who's asked about, I think it was Giles, just when you mentioned about soft spots between the lines of structural steel as not along. But I think we all knew that's what you meant.
Apologies, this is my first BCO virtual tool, so I might have stumbled over a couple of my words.
No, you were absolutely fine. You were all really great. Thank you. And I've got a question from Stephen Lewis, actually. Why only 2.7 floor to ceiling, given the desire to maximize daylight?
Ross,
yeah, I think again, it's sort of a balancing act. We've got about 12 meters from the central core to the front elevation at its steepest point. So in terms of the whole geometry of the site, it's kind of a balancing act on depth of floor plan versus floor to ceiling height. But I suppose it also touches on when Giles was explaining all the different ceiling options and how we're not sort of looking to install a traditional ceiling on day one. So you've actually got about 3.7 on the floors when there's no sort of traditional ceiling grid put in. So again, if you're going for a raft layout or just completely exposed services, you're going to get that extra floor to ceiling height that you wouldn't necessarily with sort of like a traditional ceiling grid like T behind me.
Yeah. So there is an opportunity to actually create a varying ceiling landscape.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. I've got a wee question from Deborah Wilder. So she says, great presentation, thank you. We've wondered if your Wi-Fi system extends to the basement, can people access Wi-Fi while waiting for a shower, etc.?
Absolutely, yes. So we've got, it's important for us to, in this age of being digitally always on, that people are able to access Wi-Fi wherever they want, in the lifts, which is another bugbear. But yeah, lifts, basements, anywhere in the landlord common parts.
Yeah.
I would say, just adding to that, the basement needs to, we really wanted to turn the basement from this place where you don't want to be, you don't want to go, you don't want to have to use it in a traditional office space where, there's place where you actually want to, let's go to the basement. It's, it's vibrant. There's a lot of color. It's all the facilities I need. I can actually iron my shirt. I can, I'm a runner. I don't have to be a cyclist to enjoy it. I'm a runner. There's a stretching area. There's a lot of things are happening down there. So I think it would be a shame to then, minimize that kind of experience by not having the full Wi-Fi, which provides even more than there. So yes, absolutely.
Great. Okay. No, fantastic. Deborah actually had another question, and I think it leads on. She asked about the 3 ceiling system options and just comments that they're great. And how modifiable are the rafts? Can there be a combination of rafts? And I think maybe you answered that earlier, Ross. Yep. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I'll answer for him if he's yeah, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah. And look, I think your point, Gillian, on waste is such an important when 17% of all building materials delivered to site never actually get installed. They go straight in the bin.
Yeah.
Which I think is an astonishing statistic. And of course, we're fighting tooth and nail on these developments to have 96, 98% landfill diversion during construction, and yet here we are, we're kind of putting in stuff, and it's the saddest day. It's the happiest day usually of my life. And always the saddest is when you hand the keys over to the tenant, because happy because they're in, but sad because the immediate first thing they do is they bring in steps, and down comes everything that you've argued with the contractor about, little flecks of paint that are not taken off. It's like I think it's such an important thing, and I think hopefully we'll see more and more of this across the industry.
Yeah, I really hope that too.
And then just mentioning as well that now that we are really having detailed discussions with prospective tenants, the nature of the discussion is completely changed, because you start from the base where you offer flexibility, as opposed to saying, here is what I deliver, take it or leave it, but not my problem. I think we're finding ourselves being in a much more kind of collaborative process with them. So they may say, actually, what you've done here is really good, and I like what this tenant has done there, but could we actually do a hybrid, or could we do? So I think you end up not sitting on both sides of the table, but really much
just integrated,
making it happening together, which is obviously much more satisfying for developers, I guess.
Well, for both. Because you just feel that actually it's something that you've achieved together, which is great. I have a wee question from Kieran Goodman, and it's an environmental one. Did you set a specific embodied carbon target for the construction at the outset for the designers to work towards, or was it more of a best in practice approach to challenge the typical spec of a Grade A office building and drive the embodied carbon down as best the design team could?
I think it's a great question, and I think we shouldn't just gloss over the embodied carbon question, because I think it's increasingly important. I know there's another question also about retrofits, but I think when we inherited the design, I'm thinking now the original design, and Ross, you may remember, it was probably 5 years ago at this stage, and so when we bought the building, that was already there. So a lot of that ship had already sailed, but we did go back into it, and I'd say it was probably more of the latter, challenging the team around best practice as opposed to specific embodied carbon targets. I mean, we've done a whole life carbon analysis, and we've done all the things that you would expect, but I think specifically on that question, it was more of best practice. Ross.
Okay. Yep. And Jeff Taylor also asks you, as you pointed out, what was the biggest challenge you faced
on net zero? Yeah, I think it was probably the solar gain questions. I think you always have this trade-off between these different things that you're trying to achieve: wellness and light and happiness and harmony, solar gain, design ethos. So I think probably it was the solar and the amount of glazing, and so we did some innovative things around the glass and what we used in particular around the glass and where we sourced the glass and the particular characteristics that it had. So I think that was was
biggest challenge.
a biggest challenge. But I think, you know, you probably see it's buildings probably have slightly lower glazing ratios than this if you were to design it again, because that's an easy win.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you need also to really have a working with a main contractor, which is quite flexible in that way, that where you challenge the procurement, because I think that was one of the things which was great. We worked with Balmer in Kirkland here on the project. They've been absolutely fantastic in listening to us initially to say, okay, you may not be our like a traditional employer / no client. We will work together with you to try to then pass that on to the supply chain, because otherwise, you know, when you're sitting like speaking to your main contractor, it's very, very hard. I think it might be one of the key challenges that we had to make sure that whoever is going to be producing and manufacturing and all the products that are going to be delivered and used on site, then, you know, we want to minimize single-use plastic. We want to make sure that it is locally sourced as much as possible. We want to make sure that there is all sorts of policies and guidelines and concepts and in place where all that needs to flow through the supply chain. Is really hard to get to. So if you really need to make sure initially that you have a main contractor which is really supporting that, because they are absolutely key in the delivery.
And was that key in the contractor selection? So did you, when you were going out to tender, and that was really
absolutely
50% scoring in our weightings was around ESG.
Great. Okay, no, fantastic. There's a wee question in the chat from Rob Cargill. He's asking about the connection between Metrica's and the control system and the BMS. So does Metrica's system replace the BMS, or does it interface with it? Is it a bolt-on?
Yeah, so it's a standalone system, and we're using it here in our offices as we've set up our office really as a bit of a lab for some of this stuff. So it's for us, it's here and in Cadworks, it's a bolt-on. It can be connected to the BMS and start to influence how the building is controlled. But I think in the first instance, it's a one-way information out. But something that we're looking at for sure is how much we should be able to influence through these sort of automatic systems the building, and indeed how much control to give to the occupants. You know, do you want to give them an app that can raise and lower the temperature in their little location, or open and shut windows, or whatever it may be? So it's a good question though.
Okay. There's a question from Fraser Davey. So moving forwards, will you also be looking to repurpose existing buildings where appropriate to further reduce carbon footprint, lifetime carbon emissions? And what is the tipping point between new build versus repurpose from a client perspective? Yeah,
it's an important point, and I mean, we've signed the AJ retrofit first commitment. So we are committed to retrofitting before redeveloping, notwithstanding that we're talking obviously about a redevelopment. I think in this particular instance, the two buildings that were occupying the site were really, there was no way to save them, and we did look at that beforehand. It was just economically impossible, but we recognize fully, and we say it all the time, that 80% of the buildings that will exist in 2050, the UK's net zero carbon deadline, have already been built. Yeah. So we can talk about these great, and we're happy to talk about great shiny new developments like ours and Stevens at next door 177, and these are all fantastic buildings. But if we don't solve the 80% problem, we're in deep trouble. So so we get as excited, if not more excited, about solving that problem. And I think retrofits are a really key part of the equation. And we've done a few. We've done Windmill Green in Manchester, and we're doing one in London now, Tarbridge Court. And I think that the gap from a customer point of view, as your question kind of intimates there, Fraser, is actually narrowing, and we're actually almost seeing no difference in rent between a well done retrofit and new build.
Great. Well, that's Fantastic, thank you. One other question from Stephen. So he's applauding your work on community benefits, which I have to agree with. Fantastic what you were doing, and he's saying, do you have any plans for further initiatives?
Yeah, I'd say watch the space. I mean, what we've done in terms of having a positive impact on the community. I mean, we don't even have a building. So
yeah,
I mean,
not there yet.
We've done things around cycling and helping helping have genuinely tangible positive outcomes in our social impact agenda without even having the benefit of the building. So wait till we have 1,000 people working in there and space that we can actually use. This has been virtual.
Yeah.
So absolutely, there's these organizations that we mentioned and a whole lot more that we've got specific plans in place to partner with.
They need we're having ongoing discussions with them, and it falls outside, and it's kind of overflowing from the Cadworks initial scope frame of discussions, and now we're getting discussions with social bicycle riders on a regular basis about other things they do and other things that we do. And so it means that, Cadworks is really a place where they know they can have like a physical presence, and these social organizations do need quite often to have space somewhere. They may need to store something for some time. They may need to actually come and promote something that they're doing, and they know that this is always a bit of a an area where they can come and city center. They can stop. It's a site which they know they're familiar with. So we will continue to share the space that we have with them, physical space, but also the audience. We have, the people in the building and the people around the building. So, when you think about, for instance, soul riders, Cadworks could become one of the, the soul rider community flagship in town, where they do training. They can come and fix bikes. They can help teach about security on the road, which we know is a big concern for many, and that's the reason why people don't decide not to cycle, because it's too dangerous. But if you can be taught how to and to group people together, there are absolutely tons of things that can be done and that will be done and that are being done. But
and you do wonder if there could be a wider kind of that part of the CBD network. So Stephen's clearly got a new building, and there's a number of other developments that Ross referred to earlier. So there could be a bit of a network that you could build within the CBD community too.
Absolutely.
Yep. There's a final last question from Alan West. It's a services question. So he says, presumably the services installation on the floor plate soffit had particular attention in terms of finishes quality if a tenant is to retain the option to run without ceilings and exposed surfaces. And was there a recognised cost burden there?
So Ross, maybe do you want to take that, Ross? Is that more of a technical one? Sorry.
Yeah, well, I think it's worth highlighting that there are no ceiling services going in on any of the floors, which is intentional. So all services are taken up the risers. The risers are all fully populated, and they all terminate within a neat bulkhead around the central core. So at that point that somebody takes an individual floor, there's, apart from life safety equipment which is on each floor, so we've put in sprinklers and emergency lights. Apart from that, they'll be completely blank just now. So it'll really be up to the conversation when the tenant comes in, how they see their own personal fit out working with that, and how sort of industrial a look or more corporate that they want to go with it. But yeah, there's nothing in other than life safety.
Exactly. And I think that's
minimize waste.
Exactly. And so, Alan, I think that was, and then back to the point that I was mentioning before, which is then that's where the discussions also starts to change in nature a little bit with the prospective tenant, incoming tenant, because they have, they can consider options, they can really think from a blank canvas, and we're here to kind of help and guide. And obviously we know the building inside out, we've got contractor and supply chain available. And so currently, it's absolutely clean soffit with everything is capped off, as was said, but then the discussion starts, which arose for pretty much anything at that point.
Okay. Have you had any pushback from building control on sprinklers? I just wondered, because I'd heard that from a services engineer on another project.
In terms of
termination of them and signing off, I suppose.
No, not to date. So yeah,
okay.
we have been in quite detailed discussion, because usually building control are more used to seeing a traditional Cat A finish to an office, rather than than terminating everything at the central core itself. So we've just tried to take them on the journey, and so far, touch wood, they've been out on their regular visits, and there hasn't been anything that they've been flagging up. But we do have a full sprinkler installation in on day one. That is something that they've sort of said is non-negotiable.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. I mean, I have to say, having lived and worked in Glasgow for many years, I can't remember the previous buildings. And when I saw your slide deck last night, and there was that blue horror, the blue glass horror, I was like, oh my goodness, that's what was there. It's funny how you just wipe them from your memory bank. So I think what you've demonstrated here is that you've got an incredibly vibrant special building that's going to be going up in its place, and I think it's to be applauded. And I think so I just wanted to say it looks fantastic, and it's been a fantastic presentation today. So I don't think we've got any other questions, and I just thought, on the behalf of the BCO, I wanted to thank you so much for your time and your attention to detail of the presentation today. There's a number of comments in the chat about what a great presentation it's been, and thanks so much.
Great.
I think we're pretty much ready to go.
Thanks you and to the BCO, and thanks everyone for joining in as well. And we hope to welcome you in October when we open the doors.
I think that would be fantastic, actually.
On time and on budget as well.
Good.
So you don't get to say those words too often, so I'll slip that one in.
Yeah, and good luck with your letting. I hope it goes well.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Right. Talk soon.
Thanks very much. I think we're probably just going to sign off unless we've got another question. It's just popped in.
Great, thank you.
Malcolm Stroud, great, thank you.
You're welcome, Malcolm.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.